It started like any other quiet weekend. The lawnmowers buzzed in the distance, birds chirped in their usual disorganized chorus, and I stood at my kitchen window pretending not to stare. He was out there again, shirt off, skin glistening in the sun, pushing that mower like he had nothing better to do than send me into silent chaos. I wasn't supposed to feel anything. Had a man. Had a life. But that didn't stop the warmth in my stomach every time our eyes met across the fence. He was barely more than a boy. 21, maybe 22. His mother had mentioned he moved back home after college, figuring himself out or whatever the excuse was. All I saw was muscle, energy, youth. And the way he looked at me, like he already knew my secrets. The first time we spoke was about something stupid. My dog had slipped through a broken piece of the fence and ended up sniffing around his backyard. He knocked on the door, leash in hand, that same smug half-smile on his face. "Thought you might want him back," he said, and I knew he was talking about more than the dog. I thanked him, tried to laugh it off, but he lingered. He asked if I needed help with the groceries I was unloading. I should have said no. But I didn't. He followed me into the kitchen, both arms loaded with bags like it was the most natural thing in the world. I thanked him again and he said, "Anytime. You've got one of the best views on the block." I blinked, confused. "What view?" I asked. His smile deepened and he said, "You." I let the silence hang too long. He didn't look away. My laugh came out too sharp and I told him I was old enough to be his. Well, something older. He grinned like he didn't care, like he'd said it to watch me squirm. When he left, I locked the door and stood against it, chest heaving like I'd just run a mile. I hated the way it made me feel, exposed, hungry. It wasn't just the attention. It was that it had been so long since anyone looked at me that way. My partner had stopped seeing me years ago. We coexisted now. Me trying to keep things together. Him too absorbed in his phone, work, sports, whatever excuse not to be present. We hadn't touched in weeks. Months maybe. That night, I found myself thinking about the neighbor while I lay beside a man who barely noticed if I came to bed or not. Felt wrong. Felt alive. The next time I saw him was a few days later. I was watering the plants on the front porch. He waved and crossed the lawn, shirtless again. I told myself to look away, but my body refused to obey. He asked if I needed help fixing the fence. I hadn't asked for help, but he insisted. "Might fall over next time your pup goes wild," he joked. He came over with tools. He worked shirtless. I brought him lemonade and tried to act like it wasn't ridiculous, like I didn't notice the way he stretched, flexed, moved. He caught me looking. I felt my cheeks burn. He leaned on the fence and asked, "So, what does your guy do?" "Finance," I replied, instantly regretting it. "Gone a lot?" he asked like he already knew the answer. He nodded. "He's lucky," he said. "You've got this energy. People don't notice it maybe. But I do." I didn't have a reply. I went back inside, closed the door, and leaned against the wall, shaking. Over the next few days, I became hyper-aware of every movement. Every time I stepped out to get the mail or take out the trash, I caught his eyes. He didn't hide it anymore. And maybe I didn't either. One afternoon he knocked again. Said he made too much food. Chicken pasta, something simple. Asked if I wanted a plate. I let him in. He set the plate down, looked around the kitchen like he'd been there before. "Cozy," he said, and something about the way he looked at me made the air between us tighten. He stood too close. Just enough to notice. Not enough to call out. When I reached for the plate, his fingers brushed mine, slow, deliberate. I jerked away and muttered a thank you. He smiled and walked to the door. Before leaving, he said, "If you ever want company, I'm next door. You don't have to be alone." He closed the door behind him, and I was left in that quiet kitchen, holding a plate of food I had no appetite for, heart pounding like I'd just done something shameful. But I hadn't. Not yet. That night I didn't sleep. I kept picturing that look in his eyes, the way he studied me like I was something worth wanting. I hadn't felt that in years. I didn't understand what he saw, But I couldn't deny that it pulled something out of me. Something I thought had dried up long ago. I told myself it was harmless. Just attention. Just a silly little game. But deep down, I knew I had already opened a door that couldn't be shut. The air between us had shifted. Every glance now felt charged, like a silent dare waiting for one of us to take it. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was projecting something that wasn't there. But I knew better. He wasn't subtle anymore. He lingered outside longer, found excuses to be near the fence when I was outside, casually shirtless like it was just how things were. But it wasn't casual, not for me. I started noticing the little things. How his eyes moved down my body when I wore tighter clothes. How he smiled only with the corner of his mouth when he caught me watching him. How he spoke slower around me, like he wanted to give me time to react. I didn't dress for him. That's what I told myself. I told myself I put on the sundress because it was hot, not because I saw him walking out to his car and wanted to feel something spark in his eyes. But when he paused, looked over his shoulder and said, "That color suits you," I felt that spark all the way through me. I laughed, said something casual, but my hands were shaking. I could feel my skin tingling, like it knew something I hadn't admitted yet. That night, I didn't touch my husband. He came home late, barely acknowledged me. I waited in bed for him to say anything, to look at me like I still existed. He turned off the light without a word. I lay there in the dark, awake, imagining a different voice whispering my name. A few days later, I caught him watching me from his porch. Froze. He didn't. He held my gaze and didn't look away until I did. It was bold and I felt it everywhere. I knew I should avoid him. I should pull back, stop feeding the tension, but I didn't. I found excuses to go outside, to walk past his house, to check the mailbox even when I knew it was empty. He noticed. Of course he did. I was folding laundry when he texted me. I had never given him my number. I didn't even know when it happened. The message was simple. "Are you alone?" My heart dropped, then kicked back up hard in my chest. I stared at it for a full minute before I typed back. "Why?" "Just wondering," he replied. Then, "I can't stop thinking about you." I didn't respond. I deleted the thread. But the words stayed. I couldn't stop thinking either. Later that week, I was bringing in groceries when he appeared again. "Need help?" he asked. This time I didn't say no. He followed me inside, close enough that I could feel the heat off his body. He didn't touch me, didn't say anything inappropriate. But his presence was heavy. He didn't need to say anything. It was all in his eyes. I handed him a bag to put on the counter. My fingers brushed his, on purpose. I didn't apologize. He paused, looked at me like he was waiting for a sign. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, even though I wasn't. I was confused, restless, hungry for something I hadn't let myself name. "I meant what I said," he told me quietly. "About thinking about you. I'm not sure you know what you're doing," I said, even as my voice trembled. "I know exactly what I'm doing," he replied. I should have told him to stop. I should have asked him to leave. Instead, I stood there, caught in the space between resistance and surrender. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, just staring, breathing, knowing. He stepped closer. My body didn't move. "Tell me to go," he said. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He smiled gently like he understood. "I'll wait," he said, and then he walked out the door. That night, I dreamt about his hands. Not his face, not his voice. Just the weight of his hands on my skin. I woke up sweating, aching. I looked over and saw the same man I'd shared a bed with for years, turned away from me, lost in sleep, unaware. I wanted to shake him, ask if he remembered who I used to be. But I already knew the answer. The next morning, I opened my phone to find another message from him. No words. Just a photo of the sky, early and golden, like he'd wanted to share it with me first. I stared at it too long. My finger hovered over the reply button, but I never typed anything. What was there to say? I kept thinking about the way he waited for me to say no. The way he gave me the power to stop everything and how I didn't use it. That scared me. Not because of what he wanted, but because of how much I wanted it too. I had spent so long pretending I didn't need anything. Now that something had cracked open, I couldn't unfeel it. My routine started to change. I stayed up later, watched the porch light next door flicker on and off. I felt like a teenager again, nervous, giddy, ashamed, but mostly alive. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. Everything was already said in the silences, the looks, the pauses. Every time I saw him, my body reacted before my brain could catch up. He didn't push. He waited. Then came the night it all shifted. I was outside late, pretending to tidy the porch. He came over quietly. Said he couldn't sleep. I didn't ask why. I just stood there, heart pounding, and let the silence stretch. He moved closer. I didn't step back. His breath was warm on my cheek when he said, "If you let me in, I won't stop." I didn't say anything. And I didn't walk away. Did I let him in? I didn't speak. I didn't need to. He didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. The door clicked behind him, and the quiet between us turned heavy. My chest felt tight with anticipation and dread, guilt already settling somewhere deep but losing ground fast to something hotter, more demanding. His eyes stayed locked on mine. He didn't smile. There was nothing playful now, nothing teasing. Just a tension that had waited long enough. When his hand touched my waist, everything in me reacted. Heat rushing to my skin, breath caught in my throat, legs suddenly weak. I didn't stop him. I didn't flinch. I leaned in. His mouth met mine with no warning, no hesitation. It was hunger, not softness. Months, maybe years, of being untouched collapsed into that one moment. His hands moved over me like he already knew where to go. I grabbed at his shirt, pulled him closer, let myself forget everything else. I didn't feel like myself. I felt like someone breaking open after being sealed for too long. Felt reckless, alive, wrong. And I didn't want to stop. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. Every movement spoke louder than words. His hands explored with curiosity, with urgency. My breath hitched with every new place he touched. When he pulled my dress over my head, I didn't protest. I stood there exposed, trembling, not from shame, but from the weight of wanting. I wasn't thinking of anything else. Not my partner. Not consequences. Just the way he looked at me like I was the only thing that existed. He was big everywhere. Bigger than I expected. Bigger than I could have imagined. I gasped, body already adjusting, unsure if I could take it. He paused, concerned, but I wrapped my legs tighter around him and pulled him in anyway. The pressure was sharp, then full, then overwhelming. I had never felt anything like it. Every nerve screamed, every muscle clenched, but I didn't want him to stop. It was almost too much. But too much was exactly what I needed. I heard myself. Soft sounds I didn't recognize, noises I hadn't made in years. I felt him all the way inside, stretching places untouched, waking things I thought were long dead. I was trembling, arching, digging my fingers into his back like I needed to hold on to something real. My thoughts were gone, dissolved into heat, movement, breath. He whispered my name like it was something sacred, something earned. I didn't recognize myself in his voice. I didn't recognize myself at all. Time warp. I didn't know how long it lasted. All I knew was the aching throb in my body, the tightening in my core, the release building fast and furious. When it hit, it ripped through me like a storm. I moaned into his shoulder, my body convulsing around him, shaking from the inside out. He didn't stop. He kept moving, slower now, more deliberate, letting me ride it out, letting me unravel. When he finally finished, it was with a deep, low groan that echoed against my skin. He stayed inside me for a moment, breathing hard, resting his forehead against mine like he didn't want to let go. I didn't want him to either. Eventually he pulled away, and I instantly felt the emptiness return, not just physical but emotional. Like the high was over and now I had to face the fall. I lay there, catching my breath, heart still hammering in my chest. He touched my face, so gently it made my throat tighten. I couldn't look at him. I didn't know what to say. He kissed my shoulder and whispered, "I didn't expect it to feel like this." Neither did I. I didn't expect to feel anything but guilt. But what I felt was something close to grief, like I had just tasted something real, and it would be taken away. He curled beside me, warm and strong, his body still buzzing with what we'd just done. I stared at the ceiling, thoughts flooding in. What had I done? What did this mean? Could I undo it? Would I even want to? I reached for my phone. No messages. My husband was still away. Still silent. Still somewhere else, always somewhere else. Thought about him. Briefly. And then I didn't. Because I realized how long it had been since I felt desired, claimed, devoured. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about spite. It was about hunger. A need so deep I hadn't even known it was there until someone finally saw it. I glanced at the man beside me. His eyes were closed, lips parted, skin still flushed. He looked peaceful, young, beautiful, and I felt the first real wave of guilt crash over me. Not because I'd let him in, but because I wasn't sure if I could stop myself from doing it again. Morning light hit my face before I was ready for it. My body was sore in places I hadn't expected, and when I shifted under the covers, the reality of what I had done settled in like a weight across my chest. He was already up. I could hear movement from the other room. Quiet, careful. There was no talking. Just the sound of him moving through my space like he belonged there. When he returned, he handed me a glass of water without a word. I took it, trying not to look directly at him, unsure what expression would meet me. But when I did look up, all I saw was calm. Not guilt. Not confusion. Just a quiet understanding, as if he already knew how I felt and didn't expect me to say anything. That scared me more than any confrontation. He sat beside me, pulled on his shirt, and after a long pause said, "I know you're not ready to talk about it." I stayed silent. He added, "You don't have to. I just didn't want to leave like it didn't happen." It had happened. Fully. Unapologetically. My body still throbbed with the memory of it. But now, the aftermath was louder than the act itself. I nodded once, and he took that as enough. He stood, waited a beat longer, then left without looking back. The door closing behind him felt like a signal I wasn't ready for. The house was too quiet, too clean. Showered. I scrubbed harder than necessary. Tried to wash away the evidence even though nothing physical remained. But the ache between my legs, the stretch in my thighs, and the tingling in my chest wouldn't disappear. My skin remembered. I thought about what came next. My husband was due home in a few hours. I didn't know how I'd face him. I rehearsed lines in my head. Excuses, distractions, empty conversation. I hated how easy it felt to pretend. How natural I'd become at hiding what I was feeling. This time was no different. I made the bed. Cooked something simple. I smiled when he walked in the door. He kissed me without looking at me. Asked about the day like it mattered. I answered with vague pleasantries. He didn't notice anything. Not the shift in my eyes, not the way I moved slower, stiffer. If anything, he seemed relieved not to talk too much. That told me everything. He never asked if anything happened. Never once showed a flicker of suspicion. I realized then how distant we had become. He wouldn't notice even if I burned this place down. And that hollowed me out in a way I didn't expect. For the next few days, I kept my distance from both of them. My husband, emotionally absent. My neighbor, physically near but deliberately uninvolved. He didn't text. Didn't appear at the fence. And that restraint made everything worse. It wasn't a game to him. He'd waited. He had gotten what he wanted, but he hadn't chased more. That restraint made me want him again. One night I walked to the kitchen and saw his light on next door. I watched for too long. My husband was asleep on the couch, snoring softly, television flashing muted colors over his face. I stood there, barefoot, frozen between two lives I didn't recognize anymore. The next day, I found a note slipped under my door. No name. No message. Just a folded piece of paper with one sentence. "I'll stop if you ask me to." That line played on repeat in my head all day. It wasn't a threat. It was a choice. He was leaving it in my hands. Again. I couldn't answer. I couldn't even look at him when we crossed paths. But my silence didn't mean no. And he understood that. A week passed before I let myself wander close to the fence again. He was out back alone. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Our eyes met, and everything from that night came flooding back. I felt it like a current under my skin. He didn't move toward me. He didn't smirk or flirt. He just watched, waiting. That restraint was unbearable. And yet, it was the only thing keeping me sane. Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My husband beside me, scrolling through his phone. I turned away, eyes wide open, pulse racing. I couldn't forget what it felt like to be wanted with that kind of intensity. I couldn't go back to feeling invisible. I knew I would break again if he looked at me that way one more time. And he would. We both knew it. It didn't matter that it was wrong. It didn't matter that I had crossed the line. What mattered was that I had felt something. Real, raw, undeniable. My marriage hadn't ended with a fight or a betrayal. It had ended quietly, over time, drowned by distance and silence. All he did was make me admit it. I didn't know what I wanted going forward. I didn't have a plan. But I knew I couldn't go back to pretending. Not after tasting something that felt like truth. The last thing I saw before falling asleep was the soft light glowing from his room. Still on. Still waiting.